Hi. So, for this video, I have a lot of topics that are connected to each other, but they're mostly isolated topics. I just wanted to give you many elements of culture that you can choose from. So, the first one would be political, and it's from the middle period in history, where we're talking mostly about ancient systems for the whole like beginning 2/3 of the course, and now we're starting to move into we're starting to catch up in history. So this is just a lot of moments between the very distant past and now, and there's not really a great line of history like chronology moving through it because I'm not a historian. I study ideas. So I want to give you these ideas, and they're going to be connected, but they're mostly going to be separate from one another. So just like you've been doing, just wait until you find your moment that you're interested in and dig in deep on that. Leave a comment. I've really enjoyed reading them so far. All right, here we go. So the first one I wanted to talk about is this concept of Mandala kingdoms. And we think about nation states. So now we're used to thinking about the nation state. We're used to thinking about Thailand or China or the United States. And we're used to thinking about a country with people having a passport. It has borders. And the borders are the very interesting part of it. And borders are controlled by our militaries. We're not usually in a state of war. Our militaries, our security forces are usually controlling the borders. And nowadays that means controlling the airports in a lot of ways. So we understand the world through the eyes of a nation state. And if you look at the way that these states work, like in some of them there's no traditional ethnic definition. Like these Western states are not supposed to be they're not supposed to be related to like the blood of the person who was born there. So it's very easy to naturalize as a citizen in these places. But in these yellower places, these are countries that are either heterogeneous or it's difficult to become a citizen of them. Okay. So we got a couple ideas on here. There we go. Oh, they all show up at once. So some other ways of thinking about states, you have a city-state like Singapore now. But in ancient Greece, you had city-states like Athens, Sparta. And this is more the concept that I want to get to because this is more like what we have in Southeast Asia before colonialism came over and these kingdoms had to resist colonialism. So the nation state showed up not too long ago, like maybe a couple hundred years. And multinational states are really interesting because you can have something like Canada where the province of Quebec is like a different they have a different national language. They have different leadership. They're part of the same Canada. Canada is still also related to the United Kingdom as well. But Quebec inside of Canada has some special privileges, and it's like a state within the state. A confederation is something that when the American Civil War happened, they wanted to break up and have the states have a lot of autonomy, and they would have almost no central government. A federated state is like that in a lot of ways. In the United States, there are different. The states have different powers, and right now with COVID, it's very difficult because the White House, like Trump's government, is not giving them clear direction about what they should do with COVID. So in some ways that makes sense because in Wyoming, where there's like no people, they have very little problem with COVID, but in California, they have a lot of problems with COVID. So they're letting the states open and close. Here in Thailand, it's like all schools are open, all schools are closed, right? They make one decision for Thailand. But in in the United States, it's a federated state. So the states have some autonomy, right? And then at the bottom, you have this idea of an empire. And we have had empires for a long period of time. This stuff in the middle, we have not had so much. These are newer inventions. The city-state, we've had for a while. And the empire, we understand. I'll give you some examples of those from these lists here. No. So this is just from an article, just to remind you. So this is from 10 to 1, the largest empires. And you'll notice that the Roman Empire is not even on the list. Nothing from Southeast Asia will be on there because there was not like the Khmer Empire or the Tuangu Empire. I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's when Myanmar was at its largest. It might have been the largest empire in Southeast Asia. But these are the top 10 in the world. Coming in at number 10, you have the Rashidun Caliphate that continued Muhammad's legacy. So after Muhammad, the main prophet, the one and only prophet of Islam, after he passed on to the next world, the people who were carrying his tradition along, the tradition of Islam along, created a huge empire, and it won't be the last one that we see on the list. Portugal is huge because of Brazil, and they lasted a really long time, but Portugal is tiny. Look at that little place. Yeah. So they also, if you see, they grabbed a lot of coastline in Africa, and this was the beginning of colonialism. Was also a period of time where there was a lot of slave trade going on. There's a lot of Falang showing up in boats and the Portuguese would grab a lot of slaves and take them over to Brazil. Slavery in Brazil was huge and horrible. Okay. So moving on. And this is why if you look at languages, the Portuguese is spoken in Brazil. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is one of the most dominant martial arts in the world. Okay, so here we have another great Islamic empire, even larger. They eventually lost out to the Turks, but not for long. And then here's the largest Islamic empire that spread all the way, like when you look at the control they had over Saudi Arabia and the influence that they had in India, this was the point where they ended up in India, had a lot of influence in India. This is like kind of the moment that Islam came to India. I'm going to go back. And that's why it makes a lot of sense that Islam would have showed up. Oh, League of Legends for y'all. That Islam would have showed up in Southeast Asia. China, no surprise, with its giant empires. The history of China is so well preserved because even though there's been a lot of fighting between factions in China, the culture has always been very unified. They have a long, rich history of this enormous, beautiful country that is constantly together. Even when they're fighting, they still share a culture. The Qing dynasty was China's last dynasty, and it was enormous. And this is before they became a nation state. The Spanish Empire, one of the first global empires, and if you look at the continuity of the Spanish language, it goes from here all the way down. This is Argentina and Chile are not fully under control, but right now the Spanish language is spoken all the way to the tip here, and all of these islands. So the United States and Canada speak English, but people know Spanish. But from Mexico, which is right here, all the way down to the tip of South America is the same language, except Brazil. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese, and Portugal is this tiny little coastal country right here. So this is one language all the way through this region. Similarly, it's one religion all the way through that region, which would be Christianity, particularly Catholicism. And Catholicism is the brand of Christianity that has the Pope in Rome right here. But that's a very unified culture in Latin America all the way down here. And if you go to the United States, any of these areas that are red, you'll notice that like the majority of the names of places are either Native American names or they're in Spanish. California is, that's all of that is Spanish. Every street sign that you see is in Spanish. Every name of every city, Los Angeles, City of Angels, right? Like Kungte. Russia, right? Russian Empire lasted almost 200 years. It was enormous, but it was not quite as big as the Mongol Empire, right? Genghis Khan. And that was the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen. Rome is not even on the list. Okay. And then the British Empire is the largest by far, which is why this class is taught in English, right? And it wasn't all of the United States, but you see that the English language would cover the United States. And the English-speaking world isn't as large when it comes to first language, but as far as like second language speaking, English is huge. So here's the 10 most spoken languages in the world just because it's interesting. There we go. So number 1 is Chinese. Number 2 would be Spanish. Number 3 would be English. Number 4 is Hindi. Number 5 is Arabic. Number 6 is Bengali, another language of India. Number 7 is Portuguese, because Brazil is so huge and you have a little bit of Portuguese in Africa as well. Russian, Russia is huge. Then Japanese. Number 10 would be Landa, also Western Punjabi, and this is also India, right? So the giant population centers would be the languages that are so popular. And Thai, I believe Thai is top 20, but I'm not sure. We can look that up later. Okay, so let's keep going about this nation state idea. Yeah, this is England. Tiny little England, giant empire, and that's because England was a very boring, unhappy place to be. Okay, and then this was Spain, right? One language, one culture, all throughout this whole area. Bam, tip to tip. So some ideas of the nation state that are interesting. John Stuart Mill spoke of a night watchman state, which is a government that has just enough power to take care of some things, be useful as a government, build the roads, solve some problems, maybe protect the state if there's problems, but too small to infringe on individual freedoms, right? And this is the way that the Republicans are supposed to feel, the righties, the party of Trump. At their best, they're trying to protect individual freedoms, but normally it just means they don't want to pay taxes. But what came up recently is something like the welfare state, and that's the idea that the state should be giving people things such as education and healthcare, right? Protecting rights, but even also giving people education and healthcare, which I like that idea. There are problems with it. And I like the idea of the welfare state people and the night watchman state people fighting to bring us the best government. Unfortunately, those people are all idiots and their ideas are bad. It would be really awesome if their ideas were good. Okay, so one of the things that these new nation states like is to try to promote meritocracy. And meritocracy is where you do not give people a position because of high birth. You give them instead positions because of data-driven responses to problems. Like they are brilliant and they get stuff done. Okay, so the nation state is a subject of human thought, and our civilization is interdisciplinary. Here's Sapiens again. Human beings lived in shared dream worlds, right? You remember this from when we covered Sapiens? And we dream up all kinds of things. One of the things we dreamed up is nation states. If you go and you stand on a mountaintop in the north of Thailand and you look at that mountain and you say, that mountain is Thailand. That mountain is Laos. And that mountain is Burma. That mountain is Myanmar, right? If you do that, it's very hard to tell yourself, oh, there's a natural border between these places. because the borders are not that natural. It's very easy to come across there. Now we're afraid that people with COVID might come across. Okay. So in Harari's Sapiens, remember they talk about how human beings came to dominate the planet because of technology. But how did we get that? Large, complex, connected societies. But how did we get them? Language? Yes, but even animals speak to each other, right? Remember the apes could say, look, a lion, or they could say, look, an eagle, right? And the apes would respond differently. So it's not just that, it's our ability to create mythical glue. So I'm going to read this quote again. If you tried to bunch together 1,000 chimpanzees into Tiananmen Square, Wall Street, the Vatican, or the headquarters of the United Nations, the result would be pandemonium. By contrast, human beings regularly gather by the thousands in such places. Together they create orderly patterns, such as trade networks, mass celebrations, and political institutions that they never could have created in isolation. The real difference between us and chimpanzees is the mythical glue that binds together large numbers of individuals, families, and groups. This glue has made us the masters of creation. Mythical glue. That's what made us the masters of creation. Now, Harari is always saying that the nation state, the country that we know right now with borders, is a fiction. But he is also saying that it is a good fiction because even though it can promote some nationalism, and nationalism can be, pretty bad sometimes. Like look at World War II. There was a lot of nationalism and it got a whole lot of people killed. But at the same time, it can also create a situation where we will try to band together and do something to be great together. Okay. So, Sapiens produced fictions. Can we make a list of them? We got art, we got music, nation states is on the list, religions is on the list for him. Rules that we should follow are fictional. You think of a lot of the rules that society has, those things are fictional. But mainly I just put this up here so that you could maybe comment on it. Nationalism itself, when you look at American nationalism, it gets pretty ugly sometimes because you see a lot of this fear of other cultures. But there's a way in which American nationalism, some of the people are fine. Like they're just a boring American person who they are Christian, they like country music, they drive their truck, they eat steaks and cheeseburgers, and they hang out with their friends and they listen to country music, drink a couple beers in their backyard with the fire going, and that's all they want to do. Throw a stick to their dog in their big backyard and just relax and let everything go. They don't hate other people, but they're not interested in other people, right? And in Thailand, we can see this too. And there's a Thai nationalism that's like kind of strong arm and wanting to, say that, there are attitudes about our neighbors that some people have. But when it comes down to it, there are some people who are, Thai, and they are going to go on vacation to Thailand, and they, have Thai friends. They speak Thai. They eat Thai food. They're going to, live and die in Thailand in their whole life. They're going to play Thai music with their Thai friends, eat Thai food. And what about that is not amazing? It's all amazing, So some people are just not super interested in other countries. Are super interested in other cultures, and that's awesome. So nationalism can be contrasted with some other things. Like if you don't have nationalism, what do you have? Usually you'll have something like tribalism. And in tribalism, you're not saying all the people who are like active members of my country are on my team, plus all the natural resources. I need to protect some of those. Our lakes are important. We have to protect those. The animals that live here, I don't want there to be a day where there's no elephants and no tigers here. So it draws a wider circle around yourself and says, I'm going to protect more people. And that in a lot of ways is better, because tribalism is more straight up us versus them, and it's deeper in us from longer ago. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, but in this case it seems to bring out the worst in us often. My kind, my tribe is this, and I don't like the others, right? As much as you say, I like our kind, I don't like those other ones. That is usually what people are saying when they mean tribalism. And then globalism is something that, like, these American nationalists, they don't like the idea of connecting the entire globe, because they feel like, okay, we're in America, we have a sweet deal, we don't want to help everybody else. And the globalists are usually owners of very large companies who want to say, well, let us get the cheap labor from over here, let us open up our markets and sell to everybody. And the way that the world has connected and the way that globalization has played out has been mostly that large companies have made a lot of money, and people who work for and own large companies have had a really good time. And in a lot of ways, we've gotten more gadgets and stuff, but the big people who are benefiting so much don't seem to be real leaders who are ready to fix the big problems that come with globalism. All right, so that's a bunch of different ideas about thinking about borders, thinking about power asserting itself throughout the globe. Now let's go back a little bit in time, and I want to talk a little bit about this idea of Mandala states. Because it's probably, if you don't have a contrast point, it's not easy to know what we're talking about. So if you look at this, you might remember these pictures from Tibetan Buddhism. They're like meditation aids, and they're usually a group of circles with some energy concentrating in the middle, energy radiating to the outside. And this is a political structure that I got from, I should tell you what this book is. It's called Very Short Introduction to Southeast Asia. And it just explained, this is one of the theses that he brought up, was the fact that it took a really long time for the nation state to take hold here, because it was mostly Mandala kingdoms. I'll get you that citation if you want to see it. But this is like an ancient sort of relationship that you would see, like in the ancient world in Europe, you would have slavery, but then after a little while, you started to have a situation where there would be this patron character that would be sort of like a landowner, and the landowner often in the Middle Ages and in Europe, they would be knights, and they would own a large amount of land, and they would kind of organize the protection of the area. And then these clients would have smaller homes. They'd be farmers that were like kind of tied to the land, and they would give something to this patron so that they could continue to have wealth, prestige, honor, influence, control, power, political loyalty, and their wealth would come from their followers. But these clients would receive protection from the patron. And this sort of relationship, like you could put the word puyai here. This would be like the puyai, like the head of a village, you know? So this relationship you can see happening on the personal level here. And you can see it also happening between various cities or small groups of people. So several of them would be like Bagan in what is now Myanmar, or Ayutthaya, or Angkor, or Champa, right? And these were centers of power that would radiate outwards. And if you found yourself in like Trat, like the border between Cambodia and Thailand, you didn't feel like you were on the border between Cambodia and Thailand. You felt like you were like being influenced by the power of Angkor, and at the same time you were being influenced by the power of Ayutthaya. So you had to play both sides if you were in the middle of both of these. And the same would be true if you're close to this early Vietnamese kingdom. Between Angkor and Champa, you would be trying to see who is stronger, who's going to win. And if you could get yourself away from the bad ends of their power and towards the favor of them, people in between would be very have like loyalties that are going back and forth. The distance between Bagan and Ayutthaya may have been what has solidified the power of Ayutthaya here, the power of Bagan here, and created, set the stage for a lot more wars. And then here, this being island kingdoms, it was harder to consolidate, and they would just get their centers of power, and then they would radiate influence outward. And this is the Mandala kingdom, right? So sometimes they would also have like peripheral areas, and like here, once you get to the time that Bangkok becomes important, Bangkok was starting to be able to have a center of influence that would set up these tributaries, and these other places would be beholden to Bangkok, and Bangkok started to be a place from which we consolidated the power here to actually become more like a nation state. You had a situation where the king and royal officials were above, and they would collect from these regional temples and from these regional elites. So this is kind of a process by which both Buddhism and the monarchy kind of like would extend power out into these different places. And it took a lot of organization in order to create the hierarchy necessary to organize a nation state. And it occurred over a very long period of time. And here, this is basically the Mandala situation, where you have a center, you have power radiating outwards, but these small areas, they might be subject to more than one place. Like if you look at here, all of these were radiating power outwards, but if they end up caught in the power, in like the influence of another place, then they're not loyal to one place. Does that make sense? That's the Mandala kingdom. And that's the situation for many years. And it's described in these texts as being stable, but not stable. It's like stable in its instability, and no giant empires grow up and just swallow everything. Like for a little while, the Khmer Empire gets pretty big, and for another little while, the like Ayutthaya becomes very large for a while. But they don't just like become the Mongol Empire and start just rolling over everybody and taking over the world. So we don't end up with giant empires here. There's like a stability that remains. Okay. So what about the people who did not have any kind of relationship with these Mandala kingdoms and continue to not have any kind of relationship with the nation states? This topic, and this could be Thailand, this could be anywhere. This topic is really cool. It was picked up about 20 years ago by the Ivy League, and a book was written. Here, where's the book? There it is. The Art of Not Being Governed by James C. Scott. And this is really cool. He's a big anarchist. I know we were talking about that early in ethics, but it's this idea between, and I get this in like really every text about Southeast Asia that I've picked up, is you have the lowland people and you have the highland people. And the lowland people would farm rice, and they would send that rice to the government, and they would organize into large groups, and they would fight wars, and they would, endure famines together, and they would rise and fall together. But these people up in the highlands, they were very hard to find. And this guy says that they were very hard to find on purpose, right? So they come up with this area that's kind of like, it all looks like this, and you can see how tough it is to actually build structures up here, and the stepwise agriculture. And it comes all the way down to this border here, like Kanchanaburi areas, anywhere that's a highland around here, and it's South China, and it's the Golden Triangle and surrounding places, and then some of these texts will bring it, of course, into Myanmar as well, and then some of these texts will include Tibet in this, because Tibet, it's hard to say that that Tibet is part of China, but like China will get very angry with you if you say that Tibet is not part of China. I've heard people just say that Tibet needed to be part of China so that they had like control over India. They needed to have control over Tibet because they needed to secure their border against India. But who knows? I love the culture of Tibet, and I hope that it stays Tibet. Okay. So the central feature of this Zomia is elevation. It's the fact that it's high. And you can see from this elevation map that these ungovernable people live in the highlands. And here you have a map of the hill tribes of Thailand. And it associates pretty perfectly with high elevation. So that's where they're living. They're living in the mountains. The thesis of that art of not being governed is that they did that on purpose. And the reason is they didn't want to enter society when it was already determined who the winners and the losers were going to be. Because if the hill tribe people enter society as it's already set up, they're entering with nothing. They have no money. Society runs on money or land. They don't have any land that's like, worthy of farming. So the thesis of this book was that they would not want to get rolled up into the military. They do not want to pay taxes. They do not want to deal with wars. They don't want to deal with any of that stuff. They want to hang out up in the mountains. And you can read in this text, there's a lot of like words they get back from the surveyors of like the early British or the just all the explorers that were up there. And they're like, I can't tell where I am. I'm lost. This mountain looks the same as this mountain. Just a bunch of doys. I don't know what this doy is. Famously, this trip from Chiang Mai to Mae Hong Son is one that people will always like, they always throw up on the trip because there's so many turns through the mountains. It's just a very difficult place, but it's totally beautiful and really, really amazing place to go. But all these twists and turns make it really hard to get to. So it makes sense that society has not come to like take away these people's culture yet. And then there's stories of the Golden Triangle, right? And this is this spot right between where all these different countries meet. And it's such an amazing, fertile place. It's a really gorgeous place, but it's not, there's not a super highway that goes right there, right? So if you look, the Vietnamese hill tribes are right up in the same area, and the Vietnamese hill tribes and the Thai hill tribes have more in common than this hill tribe with their country or this hill tribe with their country. It's like they are a stateless people. They have avoided civilization. They're the highland people. They have avoided the lowland people. Because it's mountains, and it's a totally different lifestyle. All gorgeous up there. My images are not loading, I'm sorry. But doesn't this make you want to go travel up north? It's so beautiful up there. Yeah, my images are not loading. I think there's a problem with my internet. Okay. So you can also see that any one of these maps that you pull up, there was a constant shifting of kingdoms as the kingdoms started to assert themselves. And they are not super stable. So if you are going to be people who are not going to be high status people, and then you're going to end up in this situation of constantly shifting kingdoms, you will just be better off in the mountains. And that's the other thing is you kind of have this is sort of like a breakup of the the Thai culture map, and that you have the Lana area, because this was a separate kingdom with Chiang Mai as the capital, and then here you had Ayutthaya, and then over here, I looked for it, but I don't know the origin of any kingdom or state that would be Isan. So if you know the history and origin of the Isan region, I would love to learn that, because anytime I hear the Isan music, I love it. And when I went up there for a few days, and the culture was awesome. There were a bunch of people. We went and played music there, and played music all night till the sun came up. I tried to come back to this venue because it was also a coffee shop. I wanted to get a coffee in the morning, but they said they open at 11, but they didn't open until 3. And when they finally opened, all these musicians from the night before start showing up, and they're not talking to each other. They all just show up with different like giant grills and like big upagon for cooking food. And they set all this stuff up just right on the street in the sidewalk. And they're not really talking to each other, but they're all like starting to cook this enormous meal together. And they don't need to speak to each other. You put this here, you put this here. They're just doing it, right? And over this period of an hour, they cook up all this really super amazing food. Then they set up this giant table in the middle of the street, and not a lot of traffic. And everybody sits down to eat. At some point, this like poor homeless man is walking by, and he asks the guy who owns the coffee shop, "Oh, can I have something to eat?" And then the guy's like, "Yeah," and he like stands up and like makes him a plate with like all the best stuff on it and gives him a plate. And the guy's like, "Oh, thank you," and goes away. And like, it was just samaki, like so much samaki. So I wonder what the origin of that is. I don't know yet. But here's a little the like more defined borders of what you're looking at here. But these are kind of like the cultural divisions. Is you have the north, you have like kind of central and Bangkok dominated area. You have the south, which would be yet another culture, and then Isan is right here. Kind of the cultures that would radiate into that would be Laos, which with whom they would share a language, and in the south there's some Cambodia resonating upward. This is another really good school for doctors. Okay. So, from the regions to the cultural elements, you know what this guy's doing, right? So Muay Thai has kind of like taken the world by storm. It's like a very utilitarian fighting art. And when we started there's Bo Kao kicking down a tree. Yeah, that's really important. You got to see Bo Kao kick down a tree. And here's Bo Kao kicking down a person, right? He's a tough guy. And that's Sanchai, right? These guys are amazing. And then Japanom brought it to a completely different. Notice he's kicking the guy with his shin, right? If he hit him with his foot, he'd be like, "No, let's do this again. It's got to be the shin because it's straight up Muay Thai." And he's backflipping off of an elephant, trying to make it as Thai as humanly possible. I actually came to know Muay Thai for the first time because of Japanom. And like all of us rewound this movie and watched it happen millions and millions of times. This was the first one. The Ongbak was the first one. And at the end, you see this Buddha head in the background. It's pretty cool that in the end, the main bad guy actually gets killed by this rolling Buddha head. So nobody does it. It's like the nation itself kills him. But if you look, as funny as it is, if you go through these films, as like presenting the culture to the world, it's a really cool depiction of it, and I felt like it was awesome. It gave a lot of people. It was like because it was the first time that like Thailand was being presented on this giant stage to a bunch of idiots like myself who just want to watch people get kicked in the face. So even better was recently the this animated film, the Legend of Muay Thai. I think it was called Gao Satra. That was pretty cool, and they again did a really good job. It seems like a lot of these people maybe get grants from the government, and they say, we're going to add all of these cultural materials and we're going to present Thai culture. Okay, so can you give us some money? And so they really seem to do their homework with these films, and they're really like trying to present all of the elements and having representatives of many aspects of Thai culture. And this one also came out a little while. There was a movie about Kroot, right? And they were really cool. The information that I found from this, I think it's from a text from the Sukhothai period, but I don't know enough about it to say. So I'm going to stop the presentation and wait. And look at this, stronger together, right? Does that sound familiar? Okay. So the thing that I noticed about Muay Thai was there was a time that I was playing music in a place where, here, just in case you guys are scared of violence, I won't watch people kick each other. But I was playing music in an area that has a lot of prostitution happening. And it struck me because we were going to play music, but we had to like hide our guitars because the police were coming through, and they were looking for people who are going to play some music, which was really funny because the amount of illegal behavior that's happening on the street that we were playing is it's obvious. And so the police are going through making sure nobody's playing music, but this other thing is continuing to happen. And I would play a long night, like maybe 4-hour night. And on a break, I was just walking around, and I saw in one of these little houses that usually contains a certain kind of business, instead of that certain kind of business, they had set up a Muay Thai ring, like in the middle of this place, in the middle of Patpong. And there were these two guys really going at each other, a couple of Muay Thai fighters. And they were just really, like displaying a lot of amazing skills. And I'm just taking a walk, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to see this, right? So I rush over to watch. And it's interesting because you could see, like, I had been playing music for about 3 hours at that point. I had 1 more hour to go, and I was tired. I was like, man, I kind of want to go home, And that's not a really good way to feel about music, but you guys do it enough that you would understand. And I looked at these fighters, and they had that same feeling where they were tired. You could tell they were tired, and you could tell they do this every night, and you could tell they've been doing it for hours. But they're kicking each other in the head. Like, they're really going at each other. But you could see them kind of looking at each other like, okay, how much more do you have? How much more do you have? Because there's a bunch of idiot Falang around them. There's a bunch of, people who are going to Patpong to do things in Patpong around. And they're like, you're my enemy in the ring, but like, me and you are the same. These other people, we just got to get through this together, and then we're done. So the sense that I really got was that there's a bunch of, kinokuniya in the room, and there was a couple of like brothers who were like fighting each other and trying to like get their work done. And the thing that I realized was these dudes are working hard and sending money home. And there's a lot of people who they grow up and they have a particular talent, and they find a way to like work hard and send money home to their families. And I think with a lot of these fighters, and you can tell me what you think, I think with a lot of these fighters, they have a really tough life if they're not a champion, And there's a lot of Falang who come here and they want to train, and like, look at what it takes to hold pads for somebody. Like, imagine somebody who's just roundhouse kicking you all the time. I read a thing from a fighting coach who talked about his road to success and how hard it is to train people. It's so hard to train people. And I was in, and like, look, these kids end up doing it, and this was a picture from a kid who like, was a casualty of the sport, but when you see these kids fighting, you're like, oh God, please don't kick that boy in the head, and they get really injured. I'm not going to put that up on the screen for a long time because I know it's hard to look at, but the thing that I thought about with these kids who end up wrapped up in fighting, I had this insight because I was in Patpong, where, there's probably, I don't know how many prostitutes within 100 meters, probably 500, right? There's a lot. And there's some kind of range to it where, like, some of them are there because they're like, I could work at 7-Eleven or I could do this, and I'm all right with this. I make a lot more money. I'm working hard, sending money home. Like there's a beauty in that. Like there's an honor in that. And you look at these people who are doing the Muay Thai, and they're doing something on a level, a lot of them are doing something really similar, where they're putting themselves in a lot of danger. Some people are professionally doing sex, and these people are professionally doing violence. And some of them die, and some of them get really hurt. And you don't really wonder, like, oh, that kid was gonna be a doctor, but instead he was like, I want to go and get kicked in the head every night. I mean, I'm sure in both of these situations there's some freedom involved in it, and these people are like, yeah, I'm gonna be a champion. It's gonna be awesome. But I don't know. It's a gray area, and I wonder what you guys think about it. And if you want to do a presentation about any of this spectrum of stuff, it would be super interesting to me, because concerning sex work in Canada, I lived there and it was legal. So I would be walking my dog and somebody would just kind of come up and be like, hey, what's up? And I'd be like, I'm walking my dog. I'm good. Have a nice night. Oh, you have a nice night too. All right, bye. So Canada, like, just kind of lets it go. And I like that, because if someone ever punches her, she can go to the police and be like, this guy punched me, and it's like, well, she's a underclass person who's selling sex work. Well, it's like, well, that's a job now, mister. Punching people is another job, but you have to go do Muay Thai if you want to punch people, right? And it seems to me there are three positions that you could hold about this. You could say, not concerning Muay Thai, concerning prostitution. You can say that it should be illegal, it's wrong, and we should actually enforce it being illegal and get rid of it. We know where it's happening. There are neighborhoods that are famous for it. There are, like, businesses that operate, with no illusions about exactly what they are in many cities, So it would not be hard for the police to say, now we take this seriously, we're going to get rid of this. The second position that you could hold is you could say, we need to make this legal and stop pretending that it's not happening, because it's ridiculous. Everybody knows that it's happening, but let's get these women some rights, and let's get some, let's make sure that they are free and not in slavery, and let's make sure that they are adults and they are making this decision freely, and let's get them the rights that they need. And if any situation that's something like violence starts to happen, they need to be protected by the police, just like people are protected by the police. That would be the second position that you could hold. The third position that you could hold is, Ajahn, shut up about this. Don't talk about it. We don't talk about it, because both of those positions are untenable. What we want is, we want the business to continue as it does as usual, because both of the solutions that you just laid out do bad things, right? If you think about this issue, I think that you would hold one of those three positions, and it would be, this is wrong, it's against the law, and it's immoral, and I want the police to crack down on it, enforce it, and get this business to stop happening. Number two would be, let's just be honest about it, let's make it totally legal, and put in some kind of regulations that's going to protect people who might be getting hurt. And then your third position would be, neither one of those are right. We need to keep it the way that it is, because you can say this for many reasons. Maybe you could say being open and honest about allowing prostitution to be legal would be morally wrong, because or like it would make people who are morally good now decide that it's okay to go do that. But the fact that it's in the dark means that only bad people will go do that or something, right? And then the other one, you could say, it's not right to go in there and try to use legal force to stop it from happening, because you would be fighting against organized crime, and you would be taking away like much needed money from these people who are working hard and sending money home, and they wouldn't be able to find another job to make that happen. You could also say that then violence would increase because people would not have this outlet, So it's a crazy situation, and you would be welcome to do a presentation about it. But I just had this weird insight that connected it. And I know that normally when I think about Muay Thai, it's this like, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about like great heroes going to battle, and like I think about how hard the strikes hit and just how awesome these people are. But I forget to think about these people with no names who are just going at it every night, and they're just working hard, sending money home, just like everybody else. And then another thing that I saw that bugged me was, I see a lot of street performers. This kid's in a school uniform, but I see a lot of young street performers playing music for like really long periods of time. And that bothers me too. I don't like seeing kids work. And I wonder about these, just this kind of like legion of kids who are kind of like an underclass. I don't think this kid is. But there was a time I was by Icon Siam. We're lucky, that's the point. I was by Icon Siam, and there was a little girl playing pin, and I just saw her from really far away, and I was just like amazed. It was so cool to hear her just like shredding on this pin, and like she was tiny little kid, and she was maybe making a couple of mistakes, but I was like, oh my God, that's so good. I'm nodding my head and I'm feeling great. And as I like go and I get closer, I just like keep looking. I'm like, man, I want to throw some money in her like open thing. Like, man, this is really cool. And I get closer and I look at her face, and like, she didn't have that sense of joy. She didn't have that sense that she was, like, oh, I love doing this, that I'm shredding and this is awesome. She just looked like she was working hard and sending money home. And that's what a lot of people got to do, is they got to work hard and send money home. And the reason I come heavy today is you guys are going to be like leaders. Like you guys are Mahidon, like you guys are, you're going to be the leaders of this country. Like this country is going to be yours. It's not going to be those people's. It's going to be your country. So even if you don't end up being PM, it matters what you think of your country, because you're gonna be leaders, and you're not gonna know even like when you say that thing to that person, but you're going to have dinner with that person in 10 years, like whoever it is, you're going to have dinner with that person, and you might change their mind. You just might make them think the thing that's the best thing to think about whatever it is. And that might be the decision maker. Like you might meet the right person and you might be the person who pushes them in the right way. And I'm not here to tell you what the right way is at all. You should listen to your heart because, like I said, this is your country. It's not my country. So I'm not going to tell you, go be a falang. All right, let's take a little break. But I've known you guys for like 4 years now. And straight up, I think you got it in you and you're done. You're going to graduate. You're going to go out into the world and who knows what you're going to do. Like you're probably going to do something awesome. You're probably going to do a lot of things that are awesome. And one of those things might be changing your country for the better. And I know there's a lot of like civil unrest right now and everything, but the thing that people forget when it feels like things are bad is that it's actually really amazing, but you have high standards and you should have high standards. You really should have high standards because this place is great and it's been great for a long, long, long time. And this is yours. This is yours. All right. That's it for now. Your homework is to go save the world.